My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 26 years old, and this is how I got the last word over the family who spent my entire life pretending I didn't exist. I wasn't planning to tell this story. Honestly, I thought I'd just carry it with me, let it rot quietly like all the other little bruises they left over the years. But I woke up this morning, and something in me snapped. So here we are. It started last Thanksgiving. Grandma Evelyn's house. The big, old place with the crooked shutters and the patchy front lawn she still made my uncles mow every Sunday, every year. The entire family crams in there like some weird Norman Rockwell painting that nobody actually enjoys. The cousins, the aunts, the uncles, even people I swear I hadn't seen in a decade. All dressed up in their church clothes and fake smiles. Kids running around with frosting on their faces. The same stupid table centerpiece made of plastic leaves and glitter. Pumpkins. I showed up with a store-bought pumpkin pie from Kroger because my mom always said I wasn't much of a cook. Honestly, I just wanted to show up, eat my mashed potatoes in peace, and leave. I tried. I really did. I made small talk. I asked Cousin Heather about her new baby, which apparently was the wrong baby because she gave me this confused look and said, that's Ashley's kid. Strike one. Then I complimented Aunt Marcy's sweater, and she just smiled in that way people do when they don't remember your name, but are too polite to say it. And then it was time for dinner. They'd set the table up all fancy this year. Little name cards in cursive. Gold chargers under every plate. Everyone started finding their seats. I looked for mine. I circled the table twice. Nothing. I checked again. Maybe I missed it. Nope. I asked Aunt Denise, who's basically a human hairspray cloud with teeth, where I was supposed to sit. She gave me this tight, practiced smile and said, "There wasn't room at the table this year, honey. You can grab a plate and eat in the kitchen with the kids." And that was it. Years of being the weird one, the artsy girl with no husband, no kids, no mortgage. I'd always been an afterthought. But this was public. It was humiliation dressed up as tradition. And no one said a word. Not my cousins. Not even my mother. I almost left. But then I caught Grandma Evelyn watching me from across the room, and in her eyes I didn't see pity. I saw something else, like she knew this was coming, and I had no idea what she was about to do. I grew up in a small town in Michigan, the kind of place where people leave their Christmas lights up until March, and everybody knows where you were on a Saturday night. My family wasn't rich, but we weren't scraping by either. Middle class, church on Sundays, backyard barbecue type people. From the outside, it probably looked like we had it together, but from the inside, it was a different story. My parents divorced when I was 11. My dad left, moved to towns over, and started over with a new wife, a new house, and eventually, a new baby. I stayed with my mom, who was quiet and emotionally distant in that way some women get when life turns out harder than they expected. She wasn't cruel, but she wasn't soft either. I learned early on to keep my voice down, keep my head down, and find my peace in places other people didn't care to look. I wasn't like the rest of my family. They were clean-cut, photo album perfect, holiday cards with matching outfits, 4th of July parades, church every Sunday in pressed clothes and forced smiles. And there was me, introverted, bookish, forever sketching things in the margins of my notebooks while my cousins signed up for cheerleading and soccer. The family had its queen bees, too. Aunt Denise was my mom's older sister. The kind of woman who could insult you and make it sound like a compliment. She ran the holidays like a dictator in heels, deciding who brought what dish, who sat where, and who got spoken about behind their back. Her kids, Jake and Madison, were carbon copies of her, bright, polished, and completely uninterested in anyone outside their tight little bubble. To them, I was a curiosity at best, a disappointment at worst. There were a few bright spots. My grandma Evelyn was a tough old woman, sharp-tongued and stubborn, but in her own quiet way. She always looked out for me. When I was a kid, she'd slip me an extra cookie or let me stay up late watching old movies when I slept over. She never said much in my defense, but sometimes she'd meet my eyes across a crowded room and give me the smallest, knowing nod, like she saw me when no one else bothered to. I also had Lena, a second cousin, older than me by a few years. She was the only one in the family who ever asked about my art, who took me to coffee shops and let me talk about the weird things in my head. But Lena moved away after college and rarely came back. And then there was Megan, my best friend since high school. She wasn't family, which was probably why she stuck around. Megan was the one person who truly knew me. The panic attacks, the dropped classes, the nights I couldn't get out of bed. She stayed when others didn't. I struggled a lot through my teens. Anxiety, depression, the crushing weight of never being what people wanted me to be. I tried college twice, dropped out both times, worked a string of retail jobs, nights at a diner, stocking shelves at the grocery store, and every family gathering was the same. Why don't you go back to school? When are you gonna get a real job? You're such a pretty girl. Why don't you settle down with a nice boy? Like my value was measured by how well I fit into their cookie-cutter lives. What they didn't know, what they never cared to ask, was that I'd been quietly building something of my own. Art had always been my refuge, and over the years, I started freelancing. Little jobs at first, pet portraits, Etsy commissions, a children's book illustration here and there. It wasn't steady, and it sure as hell wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I was finally starting to scrape together a life I didn't hate, and I was proud of that. Quietly, maybe even a little stubbornly, but it wasn't the kind of thing my family would ever acknowledge. They didn't ask. They didn't want to know, so when I showed up at that Thanksgiving last year, pumpkin pie in hand, part of me knew exactly how it was going to go. The polite nods, the empty small talk, the careful exclusion disguised as tradition. What I didn't know was how quickly one small humiliation would set everything else in motion, or that, for once, someone in that house was finally about to take my side. Thanksgiving last year was the kind of cold, gray Michigan afternoon that soaks into your bones. I remember pulling up to Grandma Evelyn's house, the porch sagging a little more than the year before, and feeling that same knot in my stomach I'd gotten every holiday since I was a kid. The one that said, "This is gonna suck, but you have to show up anyway." I walked in with my store-bought pumpkin pie, because God forbid I attempt to cook and hear about it for the next decade, and was immediately swallowed by the usual chaos. Shrieking kids, perfume that clung to the walls, the smell of ham and overcooked green bean casserole. Everyone was already there. My cousins Jake and Madison were standing by the fireplace, posing for pictures with their perfect families. Aunt Denise was barking orders about place settings and who brought the wrong brand of whipped cream. No one noticed I'd arrived. Not really. I tried making conversation, the way you do when you know it won't go anywhere. I asked Cousin Heather about her baby. only to realize, wrong cousin, wrong baby. Got a polite smile and a quick pivot. Complimented Aunt Marcy's sweater. Got the kind of smile you give to a stranger in line at the DMV. I should have known then to leave. But I didn't. Dinner was called. Everyone started finding their names at the big, stupidly fancy dining room table. The one with Grandma's good china and those gold-rimmed wine glasses. Nobody was allowed to touch the rest of the year. Little folded cards in neat cursive. Jake, Madison, Denise, Marcy. Even Cousin Tyler's new girlfriend got a card. I circled the table once, then again. Nothing. I stood there for a minute, stomach sinking, thinking maybe it was a mistake. Maybe my card fell or got left in the kitchen. I asked Aunt Denise, who was adjusting the centerpiece like her life depended on it, where I was supposed to sit. She didn't even flinch, just smiled that tight, patronizing smile and said, "There wasn't room at the table this year. Honey, you can grab a plate and eat in the kitchen with the kids." Like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. I swallowed it. I don't even know why. Habit, maybe. Years of doing exactly that. I grabbed a flimsy paper plate and scooped a little bit of everything onto it. Walked into the kitchen and perched on a wooden stool next to the dishwasher. The kids were too, busy with their tablets and fizzy drinks to care. And from the other room, I could hear them laughing, toasting, making the same jokes they always made, about politics, about football, about some people never growing up. They didn't mean names, but they didn't have to. And then my mother came in. She brushed past me, carrying a stack of dirty dishes. Barely looking up, she dropped them into the sink with a clatter, let out a sigh like God, what a long day, and said, without turning around, "You know how they are, sweetie." That was it. No anger, no defense, not even a seat at the table. Just "you know how they are." And something in me, something brittle and exhausted, snapped. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking. I opened my messages and typed, "Claire, they left me in the kitchen. I'm done." It took about 10 seconds for Megan to reply. "Megan, you always said you'd burn that place down one day. Maybe it's time." I read it twice, and then a third time, and for the first time that night, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt awake. I glanced through the doorway into the dining room, and that's when I saw her, Grandma Evelyn, seated at the head of the table in her usual spot, glass of sherry in one hand, watching me. Everyone else was too busy with their perfect little performances to notice, but she did, and in her eyes, there wasn't pity. There was something else, something sharper, a flicker of knowing. I didn't leave. I should have grabbed my coat, made some excuse about not feeling well, and driven home in the cold. But I didn't, because something in my gut told me that look meant something. That maybe, for the first time in my life, I was supposed to stay. The rest of that night moved in slow, syrupy time, like a bad dream where you're trapped, watching everything unfold around you but unable to leave. I stayed in the kitchen for a while, picking at lukewarm stuffing and dry turkey while the sounds of clinking glasses and polite laughter drifted in from the dining room. The kids had long abandoned their plates for tablet screens, leaving me alone with the hum of the dishwasher and the low buzz of voices I'd spent my entire life trying to belong to. I could hear Aunt Denise giving one of her trademark toasts, her voice high and syrupy sweet as she raised a glass to another blessed year for this beautiful family. I could picture the exact expression on her face, that smug, practiced smile she wore for church bulletins and Facebook photos. The cousins chimed in next. Jake bragging about some promotion at his sales job. Madison gushing about her fiance's new car. Heather announcing her second pregnancy. One by one, they took their turns like actors hitting their marks in a play they'd been performing since birth. And me, I was a ghost. I sipped flat ginger ale and listened to them laugh about some neighbor's ugly Christmas decorations, about a mutual friend's messy divorce. I was the punchline they didn't say out loud, the failed artist, the family screw-up, the girl who couldn't even get a seat at the table. At some point, I stepped out of the kitchen, hovering at the edge of the hallway like a stray dog. That's when I caught it. A low conversation between Aunt Denise and Jake by the coat rack. "She'll leave the house to me, obviously," Denise was saying, her voice hushed but smug. "And the lake cabin's mine," she practically told me last summer. Jake scoffed. "Better hope she does it soon. God knows she's getting senile." "I've already got a buyer lined up for the boat." It was so casual. Like they were discussing splitting up leftover pie, not a woman's life. And home. I felt my stomach twist. Not because they were greedy. I'd known that for years. But because it made me realize how invisible I really was to them. I wasn't even a factor in the equation. Not a possible heir. Not a person who might care. Just background noise. And yet, in that moment, I remembered all the quiet, inconspicuous ways Grandma Evelyn had always reached for me. The way she'd slip me a birthday card every year, even when my mom forgot. How she'd pull me aside when I was 15 and so deep in anxiety I could barely breathe, and tell me, "You're stronger than you think, Claire Bear." The way she'd insisted I stay over on Christmas Eve the year after my dad remarried, just so I wouldn't wake up alone. I thought about the stories she used to tell me, about running away to Chicago as a teenager, about driving a truck cross-country during the war because someone had to. Grandma wasn't a sentimental woman. She didn't fuss or coddle, but she'd always seen me in her own stubborn, quiet way. And now here I was, hiding in the kitchen like some forgotten extra at a party I was born into. For a second, I wondered if I was being ridiculous, overreacting, being petty. It wouldn't be the first time I'd second-guessed my own feelings, because someone made me feel like I should. I pulled out my phone and texted Megan again. "Claire, maybe I'm being dramatic. It's just one night." Her reply came fast. "Megan, no. You let people treat you like wallpaper your whole life. You deserve a win." Something about those words hit harder than I expected. Wallpaper. That was it, wasn't it? Always present, never seen. No one noticed wallpaper. They just assumed it would stay exactly where it was, quietly existing in the background. I wasn't sure what a win meant in that moment, but for the first time in years, I wanted one. I stayed. I didn't grab my coat. I didn't slink out early like I always did. I hung around through dessert, listened as Denise fawned over Madison's engagement ring, as Jake poured another round of wine and toasted to good bloodlines. All while Grandma Evelyn sat at the head of the table, quiet, sharp-eyed, watching everyone with that unreadable expression of hers. I pulled out my phone again and started scrolling. Old texts from my mom, short, obligatory messages, screenshots of family group chats I wasn't added to, pictures I wasn't invited to be in, the birthday brunch I found out about after the fact, the lake trip that slipped their mind, the endless, casual exclusions that stitched themselves into my skin like splinters. I gathered them, not for revenge, not yet, but because I needed to see it. I needed proof that this wasn't just in my head, that I wasn't crazy or bitter or too sensitive, that this thing I'd been carrying wasn't some made-up burden but something real, something earned. And the whole time, I kept catching Grandma's gaze from across the room, steady, measured, like she was waiting for something. I didn't know what, but for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like leaving. Something was coming, and this time, I was going to stay and see it through. Dessert had just been served when it happened. Aunt Marcy was passing around slices of pecan pie. Jake was on his third glass of wine, and the room buzzed with the easy, smug comfort of people who thought they were untouchable. I was still tucked in the corner of the kitchen, half out of sight, when Grandma Evelyn's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Before anyone eats, I need a word." The room fell instantly still. You could feel the temperature drop a few degrees. Grandma wasn't one for speeches. She was the type to let Denise take over the performances while she stayed quiet and sharp-eyed at the end of the table. So when she stood, glass of sherry in hand, everyone knew something was off. "I've decided it's time we formally discuss my will." A dozen faces froze mid-bite. Forks hovered in midair. You could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. Aunt Denise actually had the nerve to laugh. This high, brittle sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Mother," Denise said, plastering on a fake grin, "let's not ruin dessert with business." But Grandma didn't flinch. "I'm old, Denise. Half of you vultures already picked out what you want when I go. Might as well make it official while I'm still breathing." Jake coughed into his glass. Madison's fork clinked against her plate. I felt my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I wasn't sure what I expected, but it wasn't this. Grandma cleared her throat. "The house, the lake cabin, the savings, what's left of the family land. It's all going to Claire." At first, no one reacted. It was as if the words didn't compute. Then, a collective gasp. A dropped fork. Denise's face went crimson, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "What?" Jake barked, already halfway to standing. "You're joking," Madison hissed. But Grandma wasn't. She didn't waver. She kept her gaze steady, locked on the room like a general. "Before battle, to the one person in this room who's ever sat alone and still shown up anyway, the one who's endured your cruelty, your backhanded remarks, your exclusions, and never asked for a damn thing in return." The silence was suffocating. Aunt Denise's voice cracked as she spoke. "You can't be serious, Mother. Claire, she's unstable. She's not responsible enough to manage an estate." Grandma's lips twitched in something between a smile and a sneer. "I wasn't aware any of you were fit for it either. But don't worry, I've been watching." And then she pulled out a worn, folded envelope from the pocket of her cardigan. I didn't know what was in it, but I saw Jake's face drain of color the moment she did. "Funny thing about this family," Grandma went on, her voice sharper now. "You think you're so clever. You forget I've been here a lot longer than you. I've seen the whispers, the backroom deals, the little alliances you think no one notices. Hell, I was accidentally added to your family group chat last year, the one you called the real Bennetts. Remember that?" Aunt Marcy made a choking sound. "Oh yes." Grandma nodded. "I've got it all printed out. Right here. Every message, every insult, every scheme." She looked around the room, and one by one, people dropped their eyes. "Ryan," she called, locking onto my older cousin across the table, calling my granddaughter a waste of air. "In writing. Ryan's face flushed deep red. Denise. Grandma turned next, plotting to move me into a nursing home the moment my health slipped. And Jake, you stupid, arrogant little boy, stealing money out of the family account I trusted you to manage. Gasps. A few sharp inhales. Jake swore under his breath. Every cruel word. Every disgusting plan. I know it all. And the room crumbled, voices overlapped. Denise screeched something about ungrateful manipulation. Jake demanded to see the so-called proof. Madison started crying, claiming she never knew any of this. It was chaos, a tangled web of denial and blame, as decades of fake civility unraveled in seconds. And I didn't say a word. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, meeting every furious, desperate gaze with a steady, unflinching stare. I didn't gloat. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. For the first time in my entire life, I was not the invisible girl in the kitchen. I wasn't the family disappointment, the afterthought. I was the one holding every single ounce of power in that room. And it felt better than I could have ever imagined. The rest of that night played out like something from a dream. The kind where everything feels both too loud and eerily silent. At the same time, after Grandma finished reading them all for filth, there was nothing left to say. Aunt Denise tried, of course. She stood up, cheeks flushed, voice shaking with barely concealed rage. You can't do this. I've earned this family's respect. You'll regret this, Mother. But Grandma didn't flinch. She set her glass down and leveled Denise with a look so sharp it could have cut glass. Your seat at my table's been gone for years, Denise. You just didn't notice. And with that, it was over. One by one, they gathered their coats, avoiding my gaze as they slipped out the door into the freezing night. Jake left without a word. Madison didn't even say goodbye. The sound of the front door shutting behind them felt final, like the last nail in a coffin I should have buried years ago. I stayed behind. Grandma and I cleaned up together, silent at first, washing dishes, wiping down counters. The house felt lighter without the constant hum of manufactured small talk and forced politeness. Just the two of us, like it always should have been. After a while, she spoke. I've known you. No. I glanced over at her, towel in hand. Known what? How they treated you. The jokes, the jabs, the way your mother stood by and let it happen. She sighed, setting a dish aside. I needed to see it for myself. See who'd show their teeth when they thought no one was watching. And tonight, they did. Something in me cracked, but in a good way. The part of me that always wondered if I was imagining it, if maybe I was just too sensitive. It finally quieted. I moved into the lake cabin a month later. It was old, drafty in places, but it felt like mine. I painted the walls, strung up lights on the porch, set up a small art studio in the sunroom where the morning light hit just right. I started selling my work online, and for the first time, commissions began to roll in. Small at first, a wedding portrait here, a pet sketch there, but it grew. I cut off contact with most of the family. Denise sent a single, venom-laced email I didn't bother replying to. Jake tried to reach out when word spread about Grandma officially signing over the property, but his message went unanswered. My mother made a few weak attempts. Birthdays, holidays, awkward texts about housework. But I kept it polite, distant. She'd made her choice too many times. I was done chasing scraps of affection. The only person who stuck was Megan. Ride-or-die as always. She came up to the cabin most weekends, bringing takeout and bad rom-coms. sitting by the fire while I worked. She never treated me like a charity case, never asked why I hadn't left them sooner. She just stayed, and little by little, peace settled in. I stopped waking up with that tightness in my chest, stopped rehearsing imaginary conversations in the shower, stopped caring what they thought of me, because for the first time, I realized it never mattered. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their table. I built my own. It wasn't perfect. There were lonely days, and the road to unlearning a lifetime of worthlessness isn't a straight one. But it was mine. And on the nights when the wind howled off the frozen lake and the world felt too quiet, I'd sit by the fire, look up at the photo of me and Grandma Evelyn on the mantel, and remember exactly who the hell I was. I was Claire Bennett, and I finally belonged somewhere. The cabin was quiet that night, the kind of silence you only get in the dead of winter, when snow muffles the world and the air hums with its own steady hush. I had a fire going, crackling, soft, and one of Grandma Evelyn's old plaid blankets draped over my shoulders. The lake out back was frozen solid. Everything felt still, clean. I was sketching by the fire, an old leather-bound notebook in my lap. Not for work, not for anyone else, just for me. The lines were messy, but they felt good under my hand, free. On the mantel above the fireplace was a photo of me and Grandma Evelyn, just us, from the summer I turned 18. She'd taken me out here for a weekend after my first college dropout. I remember thinking back then that she was disappointed in me. Turns out, she never was. Next to it sat another photo, one of the entire family from years ago, all of them in their Sunday best, fake smiles tight, Denise's hair too big, Jake already smug, me, half hidden in the back row. I stared at it for a long moment. Then, without a word, I picked it up and tossed it into the fire. The flames caught fast, orange curling at the edges, black swallowing up those polished faces, one by one. And it felt good, not spiteful, not vengeful, just done. I leaned back in the chair, watching the last bits of ash fall, and let myself smile. Family isn't blood, I said quietly, to no one but the flickering room. It's who shows up when no one else does. And sometimes, it's the people you least expect. I thought about Megan, about those old birthday cards from Grandma, about staying in that kitchen one last time. I thought about how long I'd begged for a seat at a table built to keep me small. I stopped begging for a seat at their table. I murmured, turns out, I was meant to build my own. And as the last of that photo turned to ash, I felt something in my chest finally let go. And if they ever tell you there's no place for you, take the whole damn table with you when you leave.